All right, today we're diving into what has to be one of the most chilling paradoxes in the entire history of flying. It's a story about a perfect landing that somehow ended in an absolutely unthinkable tragedy. We're talking about Saudia Flight 163.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That one sentence right there, it just perfectly captures the mystery we're about to unravel. It sounds completely impossible, right? But that's the absolute truth of what happened. It really hooks you, doesn't it? It just makes you go, how? How is that even possible?
And before we get into the details, it is just absolutely crucial to understand the human cost here. We're talking about a catastrophic loss of 301 people, 301 passengers and crew who, by all accounts, should have just walked away from that landing without a scratch. So, yeah, that is the central question of this whole story. How does a plane land perfectly, not a single scratch on it, with fire crews literally waiting on the runway, only for every single person on board to die? It's baffling. So let's break down exactly how something like this could ever happen. Okay, so to really understand this, we've got to rewind. We have to go right back to the beginning, to a flight that started out just like any other, but, very, very quickly took a turn for the absolute worst. So let's set the scene. The date is August 19th, 1980. The plane is a Saudia Lockheed TriStar. And you gotta understand, this was a real workhorse, a very reliable aircraft for its time. The flight itself, super short, totally routine. It's just going from Riyadh to Jeddah, the kind of trip that happens thousands of times a day, no big deal. Yeah, but this flight was anything but routine. We're talking just minutes after the wheels left the ground, a critical warning suddenly lights up the cockpit. A fire, and not just anywhere. It had started in the rear cargo compartment, deep down in the belly of the plane. And here's where things get really interesting, because you have these two totally different realities happening at the same time on the same plane. So up in the cockpit, it's all hands on deck. The captain knows the danger is real, and he immediately starts turning that massive jet back towards the airport. Decisive action. But back in the cabin, for a few crucial moments, everything seemed totally normal. And then, the first really subtle sign of dread appeared. Just a bit of smoke, slowly, quietly, seeping into the passenger area. Now, the crew's quick action, it worked. They got the plane back to the airport, and the landing itself was flawless. Absolutely perfect. But what happened next, on the ground? Well, that's the most baffling part of this whole story. It was the weight. That weight was fatal. You have to imagine what this looked like from the outside. To anyone watching from the ground, the folks in the tower, the fire crews on standby, this looked like a complete success story. The huge TriStar comes in smooth as silk, lands perfectly, and just taxis down the runway. I mean, it was a textbook emergency landing. It looked like the crisis was over. But it wasn't. Not even close. While everything on the outside looked calm and under control, the inside of that sealed metal tube was quickly becoming a death trap. Toxic smoke and these awful fumes were just rapidly filling the entire cabin. And with the doors still closed, there was absolutely no escape. And this just lays out the agonizing, fatal delay. So the plane lands and comes to a complete stop. But for 3 long minutes, the engines keep running. Finally, they shut down, which should have been the signal for an immediate evacuation. The fire crews are right there, they're positioned, they are just waiting for the doors to open, but they don't. And for reasons that are still debated to this day, was it panic? Were the pilots already incapacitated by smoke? Was it a catastrophic failure to follow procedure? We don't know for sure. But the command to evacuate never came from the cockpit. So you have minute after agonizing minute ticking by. Until finally, 23 minutes after the plane stopped, rescue crews had no choice but to force a door open themselves. And when they finally broke through, the horrifying truth was revealed. It was too late. Every single person on board was gone. And here's the crucial part. They didn't die from the fire itself or from a crash. They died from inhaling toxic smoke. They died on the ground, literally feet from safety, because they were trapped inside. Look, a disaster this catastrophic, especially one that came from a failure of procedure and not a mechanical problem, it just couldn't be ignored. The tragedy of Flight 163 became this brutal but absolutely necessary catalyst for massive changes in aviation safety. And while the loss of 301 lives is it's a senseless tragedy, their story wasn't in vain.
It truly forced the entire aviation industry to take a long, hard look in the mirror and confront some deadly gaps in its safety protocols. And that led directly to new rules that have, without a doubt, saved countless lives since. I mean, because of what happened here, the rulebooks were completely torn up and rewritten. Evacuation procedures became way stricter, faster, more aggressive. The standards for fire detection and fire suppression systems got a massive upgrade. And maybe most importantly, the training for both flight crews and the emergency responders on the ground was totally overhauled, all to make sure that a 23-minute delay on a runway could never, ever happen again. So think about this. The next time you're on a plane and you hear that safety briefing about exiting the aircraft quickly, remember this story. So many of those life-saving rules we take for granted were written in the smoke and the silence of Flight 163. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other rules do we follow every single day without ever knowing the tragedy that forced them into existence?